All right, we're live. This is episode 143 of Artcasters, and this is the weekly art show that alternates between myself and Scott Circlin's channel. And we usually have a rotating third guest chair, and today we are graced with one of my favorite illustrators, who happens to also be my wife. It was funny because I was trying to secure a guest for today, and it dawned on me, like, wait, I live with like one of the most talented illustrators I know, and we still haven't had her on. So she graciously agreed to be on, and that is Mai Kemble.
He's paying me.
Exactly. So let's do. We usually do this round the circle introduction and say who we are and where our sites are. So I'll start. You guys are on my site. I'm Joshua Kemble, and check out my comic at Quarterly Stories. Scott, where can we find your work?
You can find me at circworks.com. I'm at Circworks on YouTube, and that's spelled SERKWORKS. I'm also on Instagram. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and to a lesser extent, Facebook and Twitter. But yeah, it's pretty much Circworks anywhere. You can find me.
Perfect. And then Mai, where can we find your work?
It's MaiSKemble.com. And also I've started posting on Instagram more, and that's at MaiKemble. I'm going to be making a Facebook page strictly for art as well. And there will be a lot of changes on all the stuff that I have up right now, but that's where you can find it right now. So
nice. So for those of you who might just be like, oh, okay, well, Mai is your wife, that's why you're having her on. Actually, Mai is extremely talented in illustration and has had actually quite a lot of success in kids' books. And I think has published, 5 books, Mai, that you've done now, published books?
I worked on probably 2 or 3 publishers, actual publishers, and the rest are mostly self-published works, kind of published through self-publishing websites. But yeah, about 5. There are a few more, but they're less known, I guess.
Yeah. So you've published a lot of kids' books and done a lot of illustration for children's themed stuff. And we have a lot of people who like watch our show who are really interested in kids' books and kind of interested in pursuing kids' books and stuff. So we thought it would be cool to have you on, just to kind of talk about that, and also to talk a little bit about kind of getting back into illustration, because you've been kind of taking a bit of a break on the illustration front, mainly to be a stay-at-home mom for our kid, and so you're kind of re-entering that too.
Yep.
And so I thought that might be interesting to touch on too, just kind of, and then, yeah, I mean, I think people will find your experience and stuff valuable to their own journeys, like in trying to kind of get into kids' books or trying to do children's art and stuff like that. I don't know, Scott, do you have a lot of questions about kids' book stuff too? I'd imagine.
I do. I think it's cool because I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like I don't know if you've ever heard like the 3-Point Perspective podcast with it's Jake Parker, Will Terry, and another dude who doesn't like comics. I think Lee White. Yeah. But no, so these 3 guys, and they, basically they've got a lot of experience in children's books. So, they discuss a lot of that stuff. So and I know there's a lot of people out there that want information on that. And up until now, I don't know about you, Josh, but I don't have a whole lot of experience in there. I wrote a children's book, and then somewhere down the line, I decided to kind of rebrand everything, and it didn't really fit the brand. So it's in a drawer somewhere, and I never really went anywhere with it. But every once in a while I look at it and I'm like, I still kind of like this idea, but anyway, so yeah, I think this will be real helpful for a lot of people, because it's something we really haven't been able to talk about much on the show. So
yeah, and I'm sure people are tired of me saying, like, my wife is a kids' book illustrator. Yeah. Well, so what were you gonna say? You think what's up?
Well, I think that Well, I mean, I get emails still from random people asking me how to get published, how does the industry work, and, you know, even the basics, like, you know, where do I begin, that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that part of it isn't that different. I mean, the last, 3 or 4 years now, I've been kind of mainly focusing on Benji, but yeah, I think that kids books, most like anything else you're trying to get into, it's like once you open the box, there's it's quite a bit to it. So yeah, any information you can get from anybody is going to be good for you to listen up to and take notes on. So I hope I can help.
Yeah. So so like, I mean, I guess it would be good to kind of touch on a little bit of like how you got into kids books, like what got you into children's books and what was your first experience. And I'm just going to kind of pretend that I haven't kind of been
you don't know
next to you the whole time.
Yeah, just for the listeners' benefit. Yeah, I get it. Well, let's see. I guess it really started in college. Prior to college, I was really into anime and manga, and didn't really know where to put my art or what I wanted to do with it. But I did sort of move away from that starting in my college years, and one of our instructors, David Hadlock, brought in a children's book as an example for one of our projects, and it just sort of hit me like a brick that this was what I wanted to do. It had the qualities of imagination, and, you know, you could go from realistic to super cartoony to, you know, just everything can be found in children's books. And then on top of it, you know, my sister had just had a baby, so I really fell in love with that little boy and sort of realized how much I love kids. And it was like a match made in heaven kind of thing, where you're just like, oh, this is it. And from there, luckily, one of the instructors there also brought up that there was a new publisher called Red Signet taking submissions from college graduates. And so myself and I think 2 other students all applied or managed to get publishing deals through them. And that's sort of where it all sort of started and took off from there. So I was really lucky. It was one of those like there at the right moment kind of things that doesn't always happen for people. I mean, you hear about those stories with other people where they're like, oh, I got published because I ran into so-and-so and happened to order the same sandwich and we got to talking, you know, that sort of situation where you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen to me. But but I still did have to apply, and I was lucky that this publisher existed, because the usual route to submit to publishers is a lot more involved. Like, they're not looking for that niche, like, oh, fresh out of college, you know, kind of thing. But I was lucky in that regard. But,
that's pretty cool that you were able to you know, get work as a children's book illustrator right out of college. So I know I kind of had a similar experience, not with children's book, but just I got kind of recruited out of college to, you know, for my first art job. And so I don't know if it was just different at that time, but, you know, it definitely gave me a leg up, because it's almost like it's hard to kind of break in, but no matter what you're doing, but what you're in, if hopefully if you can keep that momentum going. Because a lot of people ask, you know, well, how do you break into comics, or how do you break into, you know, just professional illustration or whatever? And it's like, and everyone's got a different story, you know, but once you've kind of got a little bit of a foothold, you just got to kind of stay in, and that's
yeah,
you know, that's
really do.
That's hard as well. But you build somewhat of a resume and everything too. So, but that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that experience too, because I didn't know anything when I first started, like what editors did and any of that stuff. So
it also seems weird, because like children's book. Now I know you like you said, you're working with an editor and everything like that, but it seems like with children's book, it's more of a like a solitary type thing because you're working out of your house. It's almost like going straight freelance. Whereas like me, I kind of went to an office, so I got to kind of, you know, almost have like mentors and people kind of teaching you along the way. So it's to me, it's interesting that they were willing to kind of take a chance on, you know, people right out of school, you know.
Yeah, I think I think the company has since been swallowed up and gone.
Yeah.
But they did manage to publish quite a few books in the beginning. But yeah, not a lot of publishers are, at least in kids' books nowadays, are very interested in like taking chances because it costs a lot of money, you know.
Yeah.
And, but the ones that do, you find people like J.K. Rowling or Marie Sendak, and you know, suddenly, boom, you find these gems, and you're just probably for them, they feel the same way. They're like, I took a chance and it was amazing, or I ran into this and it was the right time. And
yeah, I think the one through line I've seen a lot of the time with most illustrators, because Scott and Mai, you're totally right. It's like the kind of through line, like the thing that there is no through line in the way that people enter, except the one thing I can connect is that it's usually just doing the work and kind of showing up. And then I think if you do the work and you show up, like it does create more potentials that, like, you know, that kind of thing will happen. Like I remember with the Red Signet thing, for instance, like it was an immense amount of work you put into that pitch. So it's not like it was just like the opportunity, you know, came up.
No.
It's like you put in the work and then you tried for the opportunity and it happened, you know, which is kind of, I think Scott, it would probably be similar for you. It's not like you didn't like apply for that job, you know, right out of the
Right. No, I happened, my thing was I for whatever reason, I was pretty good at doing marker renderings, and it was an architectural firm, and they needed people to do like mock-ups and preliminary drawings of, you know, spaces and buildings and, you know, mall food courts and things like that before they were actually built. This is before CAD, before any of that stuff, which now it's probably all mostly computerized, but back then they needed marker artists, and, you know, I happen to be good at that. So,
That's awesome.
But the same thing with you, Josh. Oh, sorry, Maya.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I guess I mean the opportunity to submit, not necessarily be immediately discovered, but
yeah.
But I was going to say, Josh, because I mean, you kind of had success early on with getting a Xeric and all that kind of stuff too. So I mean, it's like, do you think it was more just a different time back then, or I mean, I always say that there's pluses and minuses, because now, I mean, there's so many opportunities through the internet, but then in some ways it's saturated, but there's still, I mean, I think you might, well, I don't know if you need to hustle more now or not, but there's a lot of people out there, but there's a lot of different routes you can take. So like if you weren't picked up by a publisher nowadays, you could build an audience and you could, you know, self-publish a lot easier than you could back then. So, and I'm curious to see now that you're kind of getting back into it. I know you still have a rep, and I want to ask you a little more about that and everything, and how that relationship is and everything. But if you didn't go, if it was difficult to get back into the traditional publishing, you know, would you look into doing some of the self-publishing and all that kind of stuff?
I don't know if it's the same necessarily, but I feel like in children's book, the self-publishing route doesn't necessarily gain you that, not like respect per se, but a real in with publishers still. So if you do that, you're going to probably indefinitely have to self-publish whatever you create. And I don't know how much revenue or how much distribution or promotion you can get on your own. It's almost like you would be taking on 3 jobs really to, you know, be the marketing, the editor, all of that. Basically, you would be doing it all. And if you have that in you, go for it, because there are people that do that and they do it successfully.
I guess I was thinking of, like, you know, publishing, because like Kickstarter is big for comics, but it's probably not the same thing for children's book, I imagine.
Comics and children's books, the difference is that I feel like there are sort of well-established, world-renowned powerhouses of publishers and children's books, and they're not just a handful. There's lots of them, and big ones in every country and all that stuff. So it's almost like, not that comics aren't capable of that, but I don't feel like they're quite there yet. I think that comics have kind of finally entered the book world a little bit more, which is great. I think actually they're one of the most underappreciated group of artists out there, but they just don't have the same, they're not at the same starting point at this point. So I feel like unfortunately Kickstarter has more power for comics, but I don't think it would for children's books. Because what you want in children's books is to be in stores, I think, mainly.
Right.
Yeah.
And being able to be on the shelf, because I think that it's one of the rare forms of books that people really do still go to the store, really still want the printed page as opposed to the digitalized stories. You know, you can't get a picture book well with, you know, an ebook necessarily, I think. Yeah. Even though kids are really into like Kindles and, you know, swiping through their iPads, I think that when you have kids, sitting down with an actual printed page is still sort of, I think, what most parents want.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I'm thinking like going back to like Jake Parker, because he does both children's books and comics, and he'll kickstart a comic, but I've never heard of him try to kickstart one of his children's books. It's always, you know.
Yeah, and I've seen like one or two, like there's a member of the NCS who had a really successful children's book Kickstarter, and it actually drew attention of publishers. So it kind of worked reverse. But that's literally like only in the last few years have I even really seen that start to shift a little bit, where it's like what Mai's describing is very much at least what it's been and what it seems to be. But it does feel like there's a potential shift. Ironically, I think she's right about comics too, where there's a potential shift the other way, where, you know, now that you have like Pantheon and publishers like that are like, you know, sub-optioned by Knopf and these giant publishers, like you can't submit. You have to have a writing rep to even submit to those publishers. Whereas the comics model up until like maybe 5 years ago was always like, you just kind of put your stuff in the slosh pile and cross your fingers and hope that like if you're going for a traditional publisher route, hope that they'll, you know, check you out, or you go to a convention, you know, and get your stuff reviewed and stuff. It's interesting to me to see that dynamic kind of moving, and I'm curious where it's going to go. But I think you're dead on about there's always going to be that fundamental difference of like, there's a lot of people who don't mind buying their comics digitally, but I don't know of a lot of parents who are like, yeah, I can't wait to read like The Cat in the Hat from a Kindle to my kid, you know, or from my iPad. Like, that's really perceptive.
I love the printed page way more than I do, you know, a Kindle, for instance. But that's probably because in my 30s, I grew up with, you know, newspapers actually being delivered to your house, and, you know, piles and piles of books, and, you know, smelling the pages and being able to have that tactile actual object in your hand. I value that way more than I do, you know, a digitalized form. But I mean, I still respect it. I think that, you know, times have changed and you got to keep up with it. And honestly, the Kickstarter route might take off, and I'm sure publishers are keeping their eyes on it because there's a lot of talent in that. And because you're also going to see like the really dedicated artists who are pushing their stuff, and they're probably attracted to that type of personality because they want to know that, you know, much like anything, that they're getting somebody who really wants it and who's going to work hard and do something professional. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So having kind of taken a break to raise your family and everything like that, and kind of now kind of dipping back into it, you've mentioned that you're going to set up like a Facebook page and everything. So I assume you've sort of been out of the social media loop as well. And I'm imagining nowadays that even traditional publishers are also looking for people that have a fairly decent online following, because I would assume that kind of helps for promotion of the book and
Probably so, yeah.
There's that, and I'm also curious, like how much what's kind of expected of you as the artist or as the illustrator writer of a book compared to kind of what does the publisher give you? Like, I mean, what kind of promotion do you have to do yourself? What do they kind of handle? Because I'm not really familiar with that whole dynamic.
It really depends on budget and who your marketing team really is, and how a lot of it probably is you're going to be your own legwork. I think that if you show your publisher that you're getting signings, that you're pushing and promoting, they probably would back you more, and you probably get more from them if you prove up front that you're kind of doing these things and you're pushing your books. But I think starting out, it's just going to be a lot of you doing it, calling and getting articles published, or trying to get featured on interview sites or whatever, review sites, But I think that the lucky thing about publishers, though, is they can send you mass copies of your book to the bookstores. They can, they have that name as well that attracts people. They also have their own connection with schools and such that do ordering through their catalogs for their own, libraries and signings that they do at schools and such. So having that sort of as, your sort of back is going to be huge compared to like, hey, I'm Joe Schmo who, have this thing and you're all on your own, so to speak, people kind of like hearing that big name and knowing that, it's a quality printed book and such. So at least that's what I think. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a couple things pointed out in the chats that were pretty helpful. Like Corey was saying, the comics industry has a number of problems keeping it small. The direct distribution model is problematic. So just touching on what you had said before, I think that has to do with the differences in the way the publishing model works too, where it's like everybody in comics is through Diamond and there's one distributor, whereas there are a bunch of major distributors in books that bookstores order through. So, you could be through Ingram or Baker and Taylor, but like there's a whole bunch of options. Whereas with comics, they've all isolated down to a really niche distributor, which I think has caused that kind of growth to really keep minimal. And then, but yeah, I think, Keeman was also asking if you're my wife, and yes, this is the case. This is,
yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, we met in college.
Yeah, exactly. It was nice.
Illustration. So that's why he knows kind of my background as far as like getting published. We were actually just started living together when I was working on my first book.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because it's like we both kind of had our first sort of successes in the industry like together, which has been really cool.
Yeah, so I've been to some of your comic conventions and sold several of your zines and other books too. Apparently, when you leave and it's just a girl at the booth,
yeah,
suddenly people are buying them. That was funny. Kevin can attest to that. It was funny. Kim and Josh would walk away, and I'd be like, "Hi, blah blah blah," and they'd be like, "What? You sold books?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know why." And they're like, "Oh."
Years ago, we did Stumptown, Kevin Cross and I, and then Mai was boothing with us, and she actually sold some kids books there too, which is a really good tip. I think if you're doing kids books, you should hit anywhere, because like the beauty of children's books, like Mai was saying about even bookstores, is that like there's such a market for it, because most places you go, people have kids. So even at comic conventions, people have kids. But yeah, so we'd leave and we were like, we just decided to do a social experiment to see how having Mai manning the booth as opposed to us would affect sales. And we were so bummed because we're like, oh, it totally affects sales. Like her sales just all are like, she sold a bunch of Kevin's books and my books. Like, and then we came back and it was like sales dipped again. We were like, oh yeah, it does help to help my awesome wife do that. So,
well, we can't say for sure, but we suspect that.
But so like on the kids book note, like, so your first book was kind of done with through that contest and stuff. How did the other books happen? Because you had quite a few other books kind of follow, and I just kind of was curious like how that kind of came to be. And then definitely want to dip in more to what Scott was talking about too, with like, you know, just kind of visioning like getting back in, because I know like for myself, when Ben was like, you know, the first 2 years, all I did was art direct. And so getting back in the flow of things, like it felt like the whole social media landscape had changed, and it was a little weird to kind of come back where it was like, whoa, this is totally different now, you know? So, but so how did the sort of next book happen? And like, what's it like kind of working with like an editor? Because I know that you've had some more hands-on editors and more hands-off editors, some of that kind of stuff.
Let me think. Charles Bridge was the second book I got, which was, I want to say, I don't know how they found me. I'm trying to remember, and I really don't know. Let me think. I know that I'd been submitting postcards to various publishers. I don't know if it's still around, but I think people still use it. The what is that?
Children's Writers and Illustrators Market?
Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. Yeah. The C one. And so I was, you know, circling that up and marking it up and sending to all of those different people that would take open submissions. And I think Charles Bridge found me from that and had a manuscript for me to look at and wanted me to illustrate it. So I'm still going to use that book when I get back into it, actually, and see how well I do with it. But that's how that second book came about. But some of the other ones were through a rep.
So what was the second book? Like, what was, do you want to let people know what it was?
It's Polka Dot. I have too many, which sounds conceited,
like Polka
but I
Dot
honestly,
was more, Polka Dot was more recent, I think, wasn't it?
No, Polka Dot was my second one.
Oh, okay.
And it's about a little girl who starts kindergarten and gets intimidated by another girl who's there, who's trying to show off to the teacher. But, you know, they sort of make peace and become friends and stuff. But that was the second one. So I was lucky because I got Charles Bridge, which was a bigger publisher for me too. And then from there, just had a rep and sort of kept sending to different people. And I started getting a lot of, what do you call it, self-publishers or sort of individuals who wanted me to illustrate for them. They didn't necessarily have a publisher, but they wanted to self-publish, or people who worked with companies like Silverwood Books, their self-publishing website.
Yeah.
So they're sort of a publisher. They will print the book, but they're not. What's the difference between an established publisher and a sort of online site where you can just get your book published? There's no editing involved. There's no, you can sort of choose your own illustrator, so to speak. And some of them have illustrators that they use, like you put your manuscript in and pick one of the illustrators, and then they they sort of illustrate it for you and you pay a fee. So you sort of pay to have your book published.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a video not too long ago where I was reading a bunch of old rejection letters. And,
love
and
it.
there was one that said, oh, that they liked my work and stuff like that. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you know what? I think this is one of those pay to publish companies.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, some people just wanted their book because they wanted to read it to their kids. They had it in them and they knew that they weren't ever going to get the big name and they just wanted it. And I think that's what that's really for, and there's no shame in it. And some of the manuscripts were really fun to illustrate. Like I did some that were about a tooth fairy and some other ones that, it was fun to illustrate. So, and you get paid. I mean, it's not like they can't pay you as much. Or like if you're like a big name artist like Mo Willems or something, you're not going to get the kind of pay scale, but it's still work and it's still children's books. So it was a good deal for a while.
So I mean, when you said, there's, like individuals that approach you wanting you to illustrate their book, to me, that's like, I'm like, when I hear that, I'm just like, oh no, that doesn't sound good. Because I've had people approach me with things like that before. It's like, no. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in the mix, there are some people who sort of want to pay you pennies for, a lot of work. And unfortunately,
or
you
they
can't
think
take that work.
Right. Or they think, oh, I want to get published, but I need an illustrator, so we're going to create the book and then try to submit it, which is not the route to go. So,
yeah, that's just they just don't know any better,
yeah.
And oftentimes those people, I would tell them like, look, this is what you want to do. You don't need to hire an illustrator, to submit your story. And for the record, you do not need an illustrator to submit your even if it's a picture book. They will find you the illustrator. They usually want to find the illustrator. They just need the manuscript. So follow their submission guidelines.
Yeah.
I get that asked all the time. And like some people might take advantage of that and make them pay them and they illustrate it and then they submit it and they're told later like, hey, you don't need this illustration or whatever. And that would really suck. But so I never really did that to somebody. I always told them really early, like, don't waste your money paying an illustrator to.
And it's also good for like maybe illustrators that maybe aren't aware how that whole thing works, because they may think, well, I'll do this, I'm not going to get paid, but there's a chance I'll get published, and most publishers.
I mean, there might be that case where that happens, but I think few and far between, and probably not the wisest route to take for children's books, at least.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, and it's funny because I do remember a long season where Mai would have to send that email like almost every day for like a year to somebody, where it was like, you really don't want to pay me for this, which is actually pretty awesome, and kind of the moral thing to do in that situation, because a lot of times people get into those things blind and don't really know what they're getting into,
I think that's why publishers and editors get so burnt out by submissions, is because they're getting a lot of it where people aren't paying attention to the guidelines, people aren't doing their research beforehand, they're submitting things that are inappropriate to certain publishers. So I think that has a lot to do with why they're kind of hard to reach sometimes too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Polka Dot Fixes Kindergarten. You illustrate that. You kind of work on these like self-published books by these people working through those publishers. What kind of happens from there? Like, I mean, I do know in the meantime you're also doing illustrations and stuff like that. But like what happens from there?
What I would say is go to the SCBWI conventions, Minkle, continue to push and promote your work, create new work, push the books that you already have. It just sort of never ends. There's no point where you just sort of stop and you're good and you're set. I would say that I bet even the bigger illustrators, the ones that are like Mo Willems, are still working their butts off, and they're doing signings and they're doing interviews and they're making new work and, you know, trying to catch every single chance they can to keep going, because it's an animal when it I mean, and there's always new books and new people that can push you right out of the top. So
yeah.
So were you concentrating mostly just on exclusively on children's books, or did you also submit to, like, say, ad agencies and things like that that may have, you know, projects that need children's book style illustration?
I wasn't opposed to it, but I was at that time focused mostly on children's books. Yeah. And also because a lot of my work, I mean, I didn't feel like it was very marketable to anything else. I'm kind of rethinking everything right now because I have a fresh start. So I've got interests in prints as well, like wall art and prints, and like Society 6 is something that I really want to do, kind of dig my claws into and get hopefully some ongoing revenue that can kind of sustain that for a little bit and help us out as well, just as a family, just surviving. Yeah. But my heart's still in children's books. It is one of the hardest industries to really get into, I think. And you're up against thousands and thousands of submissions to publishers. Why are you smiling like that?
Oh, Peter Palmiotti just said, I think that puppy behind Mai is a fake. And that's actually Bernie. That's our dog that went through that whole horrible ordeal that a lot of you guys helped out with, to kind of heal. And he's that healed up to where he looks all adorable and sweet and relaxed on the bed. So
I can see why you're smiling. Yeah, he looks a little fake, huh? He looks like a toy.
So Pikey Camp was asking if you looked for a literary agent, which I think is a whole, yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah.
That I think is actually the best way to go about it. If you, and obviously do your research and try to find one that matches you and polish your work before you send to them, almost as much as you would submit to a real publisher. I mean, that was another thing that I did wrong when I was starting out. I didn't understand. Anyway, literary agents are just badasses. They'll get you the deals. They are the hardest working people out there. Agents, artist agents, literary agents, because a lot of them won't rep people they don't believe in. They are working really hard to get you work, basically. So yeah, if you can go to a literary agent, that's awesome, especially if you're a writer illustrator. Publishers love that. I mean, think about how much easier it makes their job too, especially if you're good, you know? So I think that that's ideal.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to write, though, I mean, obviously an artist agent is the route to go. So, and initially I didn't feel that strong about writing, and I wasn't interested in being the author. I really wanted to just do the art, so that's why I went for an artist rep. I have social anxiety really bad, and at the time I was doing school visits and having to stand in front of like an entire school and talk about my work, and that was terrifying. I do it again now, especially now. I'm a lot better now, but at the time, oh my gosh, it's scary.
Yeah, I know back then when I was working on a children's book and everything or anything like that, I was like, oh, if I could just get a rep or somebody that can kind of approach people for me. That plus they know the business and everything. But
Yeah.
But now I've got, I got better at that now. So not that I could do what a rep does or whatever, but I'm a lot more comfortable than I used to be.
Yeah, like speaking in front of kids or talking to people about that stuff.
Yes, Scott, when you were kind of encouraging me when I was first starting on YouTube, and like you and Kevin kind of both had the same kind of points over and over again where you were like, look, I felt really weird about this too at first, and it just kind of you get used to it.
Vlogging, yeah.
Yeah, and Scott told me about, I don't know, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, Scott, but you were mentioning that you had kind of difficulty speaking to people in public and stuff like that, but then once you did the vlog, it just kind of all that went out the window because it was like, okay, you got used to kind of. Am I reading that wrong? I don't know.
No, it really helped. I mean, one of my worst memories is trying to get up. It's in high school and do a report, and it was something about. I think it was some kind of stage, kind of it was a debate or it was like a mock courtroom thing. It had something to do with Abe Lincoln. I'm trying to blank it all out, but I had to do this, and I got up there and I'm just shaking. It was bad, and it's and I still haven't stood up in a crowd, and I don't know if I'm ready to do that kind of thing yet. I mean, at least if there's a crowd and it's just me talking just off the cuff, I'm okay. But if it's something where I actually have to remember certain things and everything, I still don't know if I could do that. But yeah, and it's just, again, it's kind of like baby steps, because when I first started my earlier videos, which are really bad, but I never, showed myself on camera. It was mostly just me doing, voiceover or showing the work and everything like that. And that's fine too. I mean, a lot of YouTubers, even really, big YouTubers, don't even show themselves on camera. So you can do that if that's easier. But eventually I just I think it was the 100 days of making comics where I first kind of started getting on screen and everything and doing that. So, and when you're doing that every day for 100 days, you kind of get better at it. So that really helped out.
That's really good, actually, that you got used to it.
Yeah, that came as a shock to me, because when I see your YouTube channel, Scott, I would have no idea. Because you just come across as super confident, you know what you're doing, and
it's
people are always having to fake it, right?
800 videos or something like that. Once you do that many videos, it can gradually get better, and that's the thing. You start, and the one thing I always say is that usually when you're first starting off, you don't have much of an audience, but that's a good thing, because you have a chance to kind of fail and kind of hone your skills and everything, and then by the time your audience hopefully will grow with you and you'll get better at it like that. So.
Yeah, so Mai, how did you get I Can Speak Bully? How did that one come about?
That was another one. The Polished Press had contacted me, and they wanted me to do their book. So that was another lucky one. That I don't know. They just found me. I think.
But you said you were sending out postcards and things, so you weren't just sitting here and just the phone just starts ringing. No. I mean, you were proactive about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I wish I had more advice than that, but I mean, it was so long ago too that I'm having trouble remembering who I, knocked on the door with and who came to me. But I think that was one that they emailed me. Because I didn't have an artist rep for a while. I think it was after a few that I did that I actually contacted Josh's rep at the time to see if they would represent me to find me some work as well. Polished Press contacted me as well. That, luckily, too, was one of, I think, I feel a better illustrated book that I did, because I kind of knew a little bit more of how things worked and who did what job and what the book type how that worked. You know, it's also funny because I remember working with Charles Bridge and how unbelievably professional they are, and with their, I mean, they all send you like pages to actually use for your layouts. They just know what they're doing way more than, you know, some of the other ones where you're like, what is the size of the page and how much is the bleed? And you're having to ask a lot of questions, whereas Charles Bridge just has it already, like they've got files that they just boom, 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 this is the one. And so it's funny too. That's another plus of working with publishers is you know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They make your life easier.
Yeah, I can definitely say, just as somebody who freelanced for as long as I did, and I like the one of the most common and yet irritating things about clients, and one of the things you learn pretty quick once you've been doing it for a while, is like you always have to bug people to find out, like, okay, I understand you want to hire me for like an illustration. What size did you want? Like, they don't tell you the size. They don't tell you whether it's in color, it's in black and white. Like, there's a lot of people who will like hire an illustrator without having giving any information that's like super essential, like starting with like, you would think they'd at least know the size they want, but surprisingly that doesn't always happen. But yeah, that is a relief with like a publisher who knows what they're doing. When they're like, this is what our spread, like they even know what a spread is. That's a relief. You know? Because there's some that like they're in publishing and they don't know what a spread is. So it's nice that yeah, it's nice when people have their stuff together and are organized. That's awesome.
I mean, there's also something sort of, I don't know how to put it, sweet, sweet about people who, you know, have their children's books and they don't really know much, and you're kind of walking them through it, and it's kind of adorable sometimes, actually.
Yeah.
Because they're really caught up in their work and the story, and they just want to make sure you get it and you love it like they do. And at the same time, while you're kind of saying, yes, I do, but we also need to talk about the realistic parts of it, the logistics, and yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So now, like, what's kind of like, what is your kind of hope like for now? Like, you're starting to kind of get back into thinking about this stuff. What's your kind of desire to like go for? Like, what are you thinking for promotion, for stuff like that? Where would you like the people in our chats to like check out your stuff? Like, what should they keep an eye out on? You said you're posting on Instagram now, so maybe they should follow you on Instagram. But like, are you kind of like, how are you dealing with navigating that? Because I know for myself, it was really overwhelming to kind of try to get back to like at least to comics when I had taken such a long time off, you know.
Yeah, okay. So you're asking me, yeah, okay. The first thing I had to kind of overcome was actually drawing again, because it had been so long just sort of having the time to get into drawing. I'm a weird person. I need a super specific environment in order to even start drawing. So like if there's a mess in the house, it's really hard for me to sort of sit down, you know. I used to watch The Burbs over and over and over again in the background when I was working on my book. So not having Josh in the house when I'm working also is kind of weird. You know, you're used to being able to turn around and sort of be like, what does this look? How does this look? You know, but at the same time, it also kind of helped because I could be really controlling about the environment. So, but anyway, so wrapping your head around like, okay, get back into drawing. Okay, I'm liking this. And then knowing that I wanted to really have a Society 6 page going so that I could have some revenue. And also I wanted to sort of revamp my style. I wanted to get more into digital art. For years, I just did not like digital art. I didn't like anything that was rendered on Photoshop and Illustrator. I didn't want to touch the computer. I just wanted to do hand-done work.
I would say, I'm guessing back then, and maybe it's not that long ago, but back then probably publishers, because there was a time where publishers didn't want anything to do with, for the most part, digital, children's books. But now the technology's advanced so much. I mean, a lot of times you can't even tell. Now they almost prefer it because it's just easier to, you don't have to scan in the original art and do all that other stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of flipped so much. So it seems like a different world now from just a few years ago.
It is, and I mean, what you can do with it's changed a lot too. I mean, like you said, some of it you can't even tell that it's digital. But now I've actually come to like the look. Not all of it, but definitely like the collage-y stuff. I like that you could sort of do mixed media without having to really cut and paste, like physically cut and paste stuff. So I really want to get more into that and delve into that. And also, I'm sure Josh has felt this for many years, but it would really open up sort of jobs. Because like you said, a lot of publishers or just people hiring illustrators just for regular work need digital artists and people who can, use Illustrator or Photoshop or Quark or whatever is out there. Is Quark even still around?
It's probably more in design now, but
yeah, definitely in design.
I'm really aging myself here, but
no, it's okay. I remember the Quark days too.
Yeah. I think I learned that in college and forgot it all since. But yeah, so I kind of want to do a little bit more digital art. I'm trying to rework my portfolio and sort of reintroduce myself to my rep as well, because I know that they can show my work to people that I want to see my stuff, and they have been showing, but nobody's taking any bites. So obviously I need to do something new. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is really, also I'm lucky enough to have the time to do this at a relatively sluggish pace. I'm not intending to be sluggish about it, but taking the time to sort of be picky about what I put on my website and not feel super pressured to like put something out right away, because Twitter is going 1,000 miles per hour and you're going to get lost in the midst of it. So I'm really trying to sort of start this with the right foot forward, so to speak, and have the art that I want people to see up, not just anything I make, because, hey, you got to put something out there, Whereas I think like there was really that pressure to do that before.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Just whatever you're doing, put it out there, and I realize that not everything should be out there, Some of it needs to come down and some of it needs to stay up, or it needs to be redone. But I'm trying to sort of be more tasteful about what I put up, and that's why I talked about having a professional Facebook page or stuff like that, because I know that Instagram also has professional option on there. And I want to do that. And I think to do that, you need to have it linked to a Facebook page. Now, my Facebook page is not professional. It's filled with my personal opinions. It's filled with silly memes and stuff like that. So I don't want that to be sort of linked with my artwork, So that's kind of why I want to do sort of the professional Mai, and then the personal stuff sort of left to be personal.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, I think that was a hard learned lesson for me too, with what you were talking about with like I spent years just kind of doing whatever paid, and one of the things I feel kind of fortunate about with the career I have now is that when I'm clocked out, and I know Scott can probably attest to hopefully kind of a similar feeling, but it's when I'm clocked out, there's a real beauty to the fact that because that financial pressure to just earn with your art is kind of off the table because I got off work. It's like I actually have a few moments to just kind of actually focus on like, what is it I wanted to make, you know? And what is it that I want my art to look like? And I think that's a really valuable thing. And I think what happens with that inevitably is that your art's going to up itself in skill because, you know, if you make stuff you care about and you're content with, or at least stuff you know is like the best stuff you can make at the time, there's just a huge, like, I don't know, there's something really hugely rewarding about that, you know? And I think if what you're doing as an artist isn't spiritually rewarding, it's not going to be the most inspiring, and then you're not going to have that fuel to kind of keep going, you know? At least what I've found, you know? So I find a lot of truth to what you're mentioning. You know, I don't know, Scott, have you ever caught yourself in a similar, I don't know. Does that make any sense, Scott?
Yeah. I was noticed I was looking at the chat, so I kind of, but there's a good question. I know it's totally on topic, but well, it kind of is, since Mai's getting back into like marketing herself, and Peter was asking about what your plans were. I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, but Pikey Camp says, is an official.com website needed? Relevant opinions, please. And in my opinion, I mean, if you mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be .com. It could be .whatever. But I still think your own website. I mean, I just think it looks more professional than sending somebody to, you know, whatever, you know, blog site or something like that. So I mean, even if it just links to, like, I don't know, like a Tumblr or something like that, or whatever people are using when they're not using, you know, when they're not using their own hosting. I mean, hosting can get a little pricey, but you can pick up a domain and you can have that forward to whatever, but it just looks better than like so-and-so, you know, like gmail.com or whatever, something like that. So
I really want to chime in on this too, because I will say there's a trend with current students out of art school where they're not buying domains, and that's honestly cost them job interviews. Like when I've had open positions, because I have like tried to spell, like, because you're overloaded as an art director. So if I have to look at your resume like 50 times to punch in, because I'm looking at resumes, and then a lot of the times I'm having to retype them into a browser. And so if I'm having to like type some weird extension at the end of your URL to look at your art, like I might try twice and then I'm just throwing away the resume because it's just a pain in the butt and I don't have time for it. So, and that's coming from somebody who, like, I used to freelance. I'm sympathetic to freelancers. I'm sympathetic to designers who need jobs. But the point being, like, if you're not getting the .com or the domain that's easy to remember and to type in, another illustrator is, and they're going to get your job. Like, especially for in-house stuff. Yeah. So I'd say it's definitely relevant. And I speak with a little passion on that because it's like I literally couldn't even comprehend it till I was in the position of having to like wade through resumes and wait for somebody's website to load, or try to properly spell out this long crazy extension URL when they could have just gotten it .com. So yeah, definitely make that extra investment, because like especially if you're submitting to publishers or reps or something like that, because the last thing you want to do is have a rep or a publisher like be like, you know, I'd like to check out this person's work, but I just can't spell this weird URL, you know?
Yeah. And also I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I was just going to say, it's also that, you know, the email's a big thing too, because it just seems more professional. So, and when you get the domain, you can attach your email to that, and, you know, rather than, you know, at Gmail or whatever account. And also it's weird everyday life. Like when I have to fill out my email address and it says CircWorks, it says Circland and CircWorks, so they can kind of put two and two together that's my thing. It's like, oh, you have a website, and sometimes, and not that I'm not really looking for work now, but but if I was, that kind of something as simple as that can kind of spark up a thing. Because like, oh, you have your own, you know, it's almost like a weird status symbol, because not everyone does that. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's as relevant as having a cell phone, actually, having a website, especially if you're an artist. I mean,
yeah, I can
it's kind
tell
of like
you
having a storefront.
for sure. And I can tell you, like, just from experience, there's a lot of people who are applying for design positions where I work that took the alternate approach and literally got their resume thrown away because of it. So, you know, because like they'd have like a weird long Tumblr extension at the end. It's really frustrating for people who
Is it Tumblr that people are using?
It's Tumblr. There's this like there's Carbon Made.
Carbon Made.
There's a couple other ones where it's like they're like they leave the old extension and like once again if I like mispunch a letter in that long extension, I'm only going to do that like once or twice, and I'm not like I'm only running a small art team, you know. So if I'm working at Knopf or like a massive publisher or I'm Scholastic editor, you know, I'm probably much more harried and much more busy. So like once again, I just would say you're improving the odds.
It also becomes another source. So if you have a Carbon Made and a website, you have two chances. Whereas if you only have the Carbon Made, you know, if someone happens to remember your name but not necessarily the URL, there's I don't know. I feel like it just ups your chances.
Yeah, and just get the .com and have it point to your Carbon Made. It's like it's $5, you know. Or $10 or whatever. It's a worthwhile investment.
Right.
And Scott's right. It looks more professional. So
I think so too.
I have a quick question, Josh, for you. And I mean, since we're on this topic, and I know I don't want to go too far off in the woods, but so just as an art director, and one thing I kind of worry about, like when I was like applying for like full-time positions, and I sent them, you know, my CircWorks website. It's very much, this is my company. This is what I do. It's kind of my style and everything. And sometimes I worry, well, are they gonna be like, well, this guy's got his own company. Why would he want to work for us? Or this type of thing. Is that, or I mean, how do you react to somebody if it's something other than just so-and-so artwork? You know, if it looks like a company, or if it looks, I don't know if that makes sense. You see you get where I'm coming from, Josh?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't be worried about it looking like a company, because you got to imagine, you know, if somebody's looking to hire, they're probably looking to have somebody who can make their company look like a company, right. You know? Okay. So there's never, I don't think looking professional is ever going to hurt you, you know? Right. I would say that at that stage of the interview, you just need the most impressive portfolio you've got. And like once that's established, great, you know. The experience stuff and all of those concerns, like that comes more into play when it comes to the interviewing process, you know, rather than like, you know, your portfolio should just look as awesome as possible. So I would say, like, just having seen your portfolio and the way it's presented, I don't think that would prevent somebody from, you know, hiring you unless they're working for a place that, I don't know, doesn't want to look professional.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it didn't, you know.
But that's a good question, you know.
It didn't stop me from getting a position, but I was curious, you know, because I was curious what the other side thinks about that kind of stuff. But
yeah, it's been surprising. Like, there's been some stuff I've learned about the other side that's a little surprising, but the URL one, I was like, I'm surprised this bugs me as much as it does that people didn't get a URL. And it makes me think back to when I had like early websites where it was like .blogspot or something, it makes me kind of like, oh, I wonder if that cost me work, you know, back in the day. Anyhow, so we should get back to talking kids books. So, so with kids book stuff, like, what's been your approach in the past, and like, what are you thinking for that now? Are you're going to focus and target on prints for Society 6? Do you have any like thoughts on like the publishing world the way it is? I mean, I know, like, for me, the comics publishing world is changing so often that till this book I'm working on is done, I'm not really, I don't really know how I'm going to approach publishers. I'm guessing a literary agent or something like that, but it's hard to tell because it's in flux so often. So maybe it's similar for you, but I was just kind of curious, like what your take is on it, and then tacking onto that, like what would be kind of your advice to yourself? Like, were you just starting out? Like, because there's a lot of people who haven't even touched a kid's book who definitely, like in the chats, who are definitely interested in getting into kids books. So like, what would be your advice to like the new beginner, like the core advice?
Get familiar with the CUM. Get familiar with SCBWI, and research what a book dummy is. I would also say, obviously, build a portfolio, but networking, spend hours on the internet and look for the sites that have, what do you call it, discussions about, you know, hey, this is my portfolio, what do you guys think? This is my children's book, what do you guys think? Who's, you know, also get familiar with publishers. Oh gosh, there's so much. You have to, you know, go to the bookstores, look at what's on the shelf, look at what's popular, look at which publishers publishing what kind of stories. The CUM will get you familiar with who's taking submissions, how to submit to them. It also has tons of articles within the book itself on like when the best time is to submit. Also, a lot of book editors have their own blogs or vlogs now. They also have, like Facebook has a ton of different group pages you can join that talk about children's books, the children's book world, questions about submitting. So I mean, you have to just do it all, basically. I mean, there's really no. I would say though that SCBWI is kind of like a golden ticket in this industry, I would say, and I think that they're still going strong. So I would say I'm going to rejoin that once I can, once I feel like I have stuff that I can actually show. But SCBWI
what does that acronym stand for?
The Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. It's a guild, basically. You pay to join, but it's not a fake sort of take your money and run place. They really do connect you to real editors. They have chapters in different states where you can basically go to see somebody talk about, you know, the industry. An actual editor from, say, Scholastic will come down and do a talk and take questions and look at your work. They have different subject matters they'll touch on, from kids books like picture books all the way to like young adult like chapter books to how to do illustrations for like napkins and shirts and stuff like that, like people who represent that specific side of children's art. Oh gosh, they have.
It seems like a licensing thing for
licensing. Thank
you. Got to be pretty big, you know.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you can...
What was that teacher's name that we had at Cal State Long Beach that like
Martha Collins.
That's it. She was so rad. She was this lady who like Collins. She would sell like 2 or 3 designs a year, and then like a year from then she'd relicense those 2 designs and sell 2 more, and by like 10 years in, she's got this whole body of these trending designs that are sold for like Macy's bags and paper cups and paper plates and stuff like that. And she'd literally just target doing all this research on what was trending for the next year and do like 4 or 5 of those a year. And that was like her main living. But she was just really good at hustling it. And
she was a savvy businesswoman.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. I wish I had picked her brain more in school, honestly. for like how to get into that end of licensing, you know.
Yeah, you could talk to reps that do that kind of work for you, basically, if you sign with SCBWI. I mean, they have their own website where you can be featured artists. They have competitions. They have a leaflet that comes out every month or so, and you can submit to have your artwork on the cover of that, and people look at it. People will read that. It's just invaluable. I mean, and then they have a summer and winter conference where those are kind of the two big ones where you can do a portfolio. What is it called? Where you pay to have your portfolio looked at, basically, but it's looked at by like, you know, the big publishers basically, and they'll do a competition, and like you can meet everybody. I mean, it's like a 3-day thing, I think, too. I mean, it's quite a bit of money, but it's almost like, if you think about all the cost of postcards and websites and everything, it's almost like it's worthwhile, I think. So I really want to go for that, but unfortunately, it's something you have to kind of save up for. So that'll give me time to sort of build my portfolio in the meanwhile. But yeah, SCBWI is, I think, still pretty big.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge thing, and it's unlike like there are other societies I haven't personally found benefit from, like, you know, and I don't want to, you know,
your cartoonist society
that's a great thing.
That's another one though, right?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely beneficial to join the NCS if you can in your area, if you have a chapter. But like the Society of Illustrators, I always feel could be better. I love the Society of Illustrators. I love what they represent, but I feel like it's just I didn't get tons out of that. The Graphic Artists Guild, I didn't get a lot out of, although I love their Pricing and Ethical Guidelines book. But SCBWI, just from like a secondhand perspective, that's like one of those, like, they're a heavy hitter. You should definitely be a member if you're going to be in kids' books.
Yeah, he went with me to one of their meetings, I guess.
Yeah,
and they had a Scholastic editor there and another licensing rep. They're giving talks and reviewing portfolios and stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely cool.
But socially awkward me also is really scared and intimidated about those things as well. So that's the one thing that kind of sucks about all of this, is that you really do have to like talk to people.
Yeah. Well, I know, Josh, you were saying you have a conference coming up in October. I do too, as well. And
for your jobs.
What's that?
For your jobs.
Yeah.
Well, mine's not necessarily for my day job. It's just, I just want to kind of go and check it out, because I just hear so many things about conferences and how beneficial they are and everything. So
yeah.
And I wanted to hear Aaron Draplin speak and everything. But
he's at Adobe Max too. So I can actually mention that too. I'm going to be at Adobe Max. So if anybody out there is in California and you're going to Adobe Max, let me know. Say hi. But Draplin's, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about it.
But I'm not the best at that type of thing, and I've done, like, there's an organization out here called Creative Connect, and I think it's in some other cities as well, but it started here in Phoenix, and it's just kind of a mixer format, and I loved it, but I always was trying to find somebody, one of my artist friends, to kind of go with, just in case I didn't have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, I mean, it's not like you're going to a convention where it's like a bunch of people that have nothing to do. I mean, everyone there has a common interest, so it shouldn't be that hard to really talk to people. So I'm just gonna kind of dive in and see how it goes, But sometimes you just got to do that.
I'm just so socially awkward.
Yeah, I know. I know it's like.
One of the things that I've found really therapeutic about the NCS is like whenever I go to those meetings, it's like every single person in that room is the most socially awkward weirdo on the planet because they're all cartoonists. And nobody in their right mind picks cartooning, and definitely usually not very socially savvy people. So what's neat is like, I don't know, it was like the third time I went when I was like all full of anxiety, and I was driving home, and it dawned on me that like all of them have that anxiety, and that like if they acted weird at all when I was talking to them or something, it's most likely not me. It was probably their own little social thing, because we all are weird cartoonists. And once I kind of realized that, I was like much more comfortable. But it's funny, I've never had one of those meetups where I don't feel kind of weird afterwards or like a little anxious. I think art is scary, and I think promotion is scary.
Yeah.
I think a lot of like, I think half the battle of being a professional artist is like facing your fears, kind of like the first time you applied to the Red Signet thing. You know, I think there's this moment of like where it just, at least every time I'm doing anything that could potentially advance my career, I always have these moments of like kind of seeing it and almost like feeling like there's an opt-out because I could be really scared. And it's hard, it's weird, but it's a mystifying thing, and I haven't really quite realized it, except I have noticed in art, if I start feeling a little nervous about something, it's probably the right direction to go.
Yeah, and I will say this about any one of those things where you're nervous about going, or you're like, I don't know if this is going to be I don't know if this is a good idea. I'm just going to kind of, but then you end up going, and you're like, I'm so glad I went. You know, it's there's never been a case where I'm like, oh man, I was right. I shouldn't have gone. It's never like that. It's always like, oh man, that was a great experience. I'm so glad I did that. But it's just,
no, completely. Yeah, it's just the little scared person in me at the back of my mind is like, I don't want to, but I'm going to, and I will. Yeah. You know, I have to. I mean, if you hear the description of it, it'd be idiotic not to go. If you want to do kids books, why would you not go where all the people publishing them are meeting and going? So you can afford to go.
I mean, I think it's the human condition that you can be in a room full of people and still have anxiety about like meeting people, even though everyone in that room has anxiety about meeting people. Like, I don't know, like just tying that into something else too is like one of the weird things about, like I was talking about with the URL thing with art direction. One of the weird things that's happened as a byproduct of being an art director is like having to interview people. I think has made me more equipped for if I ever have to interview again. Like if I ever have to apply for another job, I think I'll at least go in aware that they want me to be the right person for the job as much as I do when I walk in that room. That never dawned on me for some reason. But you know, if you kind of step outside yourself, it's the same thing in like a social interaction. Like most people who show up at like an event that's an organization, or, you know, grouped around like illustrators, like Society of Illustrators or SCBWI, like they're going there to meet other illustrators and other kids book artists. So it's like they're as eager to like you as you are to like them. It's very similar. It's just hard when you're. It's still hard, you know, and weird, and but I think that's just, man, that's art, you know. Art
so you're gonna go with me, right?
Of course.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you.
I don't know if we could afford to pay for both of us to go.
We can check it out. We should look into it.
But yeah, no, actually that's pretty insightful. If you can get used to doing the interviews yourself, you'll know more also what kind of questions might come up.
Oh yeah, and
you know what I mean? You have a little insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, I've just started to realize like most of what people are trying to find out is like, are you going to be easy to work with? Are you going to do your job? And are they going to keep their job? And are you going to be like, basically, are you going to be cool with people? Or are you going to be a jerk? you know. And then other than that, like, hey, are you, like, literally, are you equipped for this job? Because if you're not, you're wasting your time and ours, you know. And like,
Right.
and realizing that from the other perspective, I think what I'll try to do is put the people at ease, because I realize, like, they're as nervous and eager for it to go well as you are. And that's one thing I never realized. I always felt like, well, I'm nervous and they're just comfortable in running through these things. Nobody likes going through that process. If they do, you don't want to work for them. Like, if somebody really likes going through tons of interviews, you know. But it very similarly, like, I think these social situations, it's easier to approach them when you kind of think like, well, like, what do I feel like at those things? Most likely everybody else there kind of feels the same way. And I've experienced that at the NCS, where I've met people who are like, to me, they're like so successful, and I feel like, what am I even doing here? And then they'll turn to me and be like, did you notice so-and-so walked in? They made like this movie. And you're like, yeah, but you made the thing that's huge. Like, what are you geeking out about? You know?
Yeah, no, we're all our worst critic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
I think, though, having a kid has actually helped me a lot with my social anxiety. Because talking to his teachers and having to advocate for him, and he's had a lot of in-house therapists come to the house too, so I've had to like have a bunch of strangers in the house and like sort of make sure they're comfortable and, you know, chat with them and stuff like that. And
yeah,
sort of puts you at ease a bit too. Yeah
for sure. So Pikey Camp said everybody is freaking out on the inside almost all of the time, and I agree with that.
Very true. Like right now, right? We're all freaking out.
So all right, well, Scott, is there some stuff you want to, like, some heavy hitting topics or anything on the subject of kids books you want to ask?
So I was curious, are you still, do you still have your rep, or do you need to like secure a new? Okay. So how does that kind of relationship kind of pick back up? Like from, well, first of all, I guess I'm curious if you remember like how that all happened with like finding a rep, because I think a lot of people are probably interested in that. And then also, how do you kind of reapproach them? Like, hey, I'm kind of interested in coming back and start doing children's books again. And how does that kind of pick up after so long?
Excuse me. I think it's almost like looking for a publisher, but you probably Google is a good place to start, and just Googling children's illustrators, reps, artist rep, writing down a dozen or so, looking at their sites, looking at the artists they represent, and seeing if yours sort of fits that. And then a lot of them have submissions and guidelines for how to submit to them. A lot of it's just an email. Hey, here's a link to my website, which is also good to have. Show them your best work. For me, I never really dropped my artist rep. I did, well, no, that's not true. I did for a little while, but I emailed them back and said, hey, would you mind repping me again? And they took me back. So they've had kind of the same work on their site for a while, but I've been able to get various clients through them still. So I never really sort of dropped them, you know?
I didn't know if it was a matter of dropping them, but if it was a matter of like, you know, I'm kind of raising a family now, so I mean, I can't really take on work type of thing. So they weren't really actively pursuing stuff for you.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been sort of a drought going on for illustration in general, as far as like work from them goes. Like I used to get work from them way more, but I think that's probably hand in hand with how things are changing. You know, there's a lot more competition, and also I need to make new work, stuff that they can actually, new stuff that they can show people. So a lot of that is my own doing. I need to get more new stuff to them, good stuff. But having a rep, I think finding one that fits what you want. Like some of the reps will find you more educational work, and a lot of people who want to do children's books sort of get tired of that. But I think it's a great beginning. It's a great start. It'll get you paid for one, and you'll probably get some published stuff. Maybe it's educational, like educational meaning, say like a textbook image or something like that. But most people who do children's books want to do picture books, and unfortunately that's one of the hardest sort of gigs to land, partly because of editors having to sell them. There's a lot of money involved with picture books. They're full color prints. They're selling those.
Probably only put so many out a year. There's so many people that want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're also following the trends too. So they're seeing what's popular right now. If your art doesn't match that per se, you go to the stores, there's such variety. I mean, you've got some really crummy looking books all the way to like beautifully designed, gold leafed like picture books. So there's variety there. So it's not something to necessarily give up on, definitely go for it. But I'm sorry, I should stick to artist reps.
So I have a question. So as far as artist reps, you mentioned when you're looking for one, you kind of go in and seeing if they're the right fit for you. So I'm curious, when you what do you look? Are you looking for artists that are similar to you, or is that not what you want because you want to be? You don't want, because I assume if people are doing similar styles, then it's like, well, who's going to be right for this particular project if they're both similar? So are you looking for something that they don't offer already, or are you looking for something that kind of fits what they're already doing?
I think it might even work both ways, actually. I mean, I think that probably you want to look for somebody who's doing similar or repping similar artists, because they're probably in touch with people publishing work that uses art like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually, a lot of them have some variety. I mean, you're going to find a couple that look a little oddball in the mix, and I think it's hard because sometimes they're not taking new clients too. So, but just try contacting them. I mean, like, get your feet wet,
Yeah.
So dip your toes in, contact a couple and say like, hey, what do you think about my art? I'd love to work for you, or I'd love to work with you. And, and if they're happy, they'll send you a contract. And you'll start probably getting work pretty quick when you're new. So.
Yeah, one of the best tips I've heard too, although if you do this, don't tell your rep, but one of the best tips I've heard from other artists is to contact the artists that are being repped by that rep and see how content they are with their rep. Because in general, if an artist isn't happy with their rep, like, they're going to let you know. And if they, and then you spare yourself,
you usually,
oh, go ahead.
One of the reps that I spoke to told me you want to check with them first before you contact their artist. That was something that I was told.
Maybe that's probably, that kind of makes sense, because I guess if they're a loyal artist, they might be like, hey, this person kind of checked up, but I don't know. I'd still, my own personality, I'd want to know from the artist.
I don't think that they're going to be okay with you contacting their artist, but I think that they just want to know that you are.
Yeah. That's actually not a bad idea. Just maybe send a heads up to the rep.
Didn't dawn on me to do that. And the lady said, hey, one of my artists said you contacted her. Just make sure you ask me first before you do that. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And
yeah, that makes sense, because, I mean, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, no, don't talk to our artist. I mean, that's a bad sign right there. They're waiting for you to talk to their artist. So I would definitely, tell them first, I'd like to talk to somebody, their artist, and see kind of what their experience is.
Yeah, because if they actually say, don't talk to my artist, or just talk to these two people, then you'd be like, yeah, I don't know if this is, that's actually a really good telltale sign. So I like that as a tip. But definitely know what you're getting into, because there are some really nightmare stories about reps. You know, I know like Kevin had a really bad one a long time ago, and I've
that
met
got him
artists.
publishing work though. Is that the same one?
No,
did you do a couple of children's books?
This is the one pre like BIPT, like way back in the day. He had
okay, sorry.
Yeah, that didn't. No, that one was actually pretty good. The one prior to that, I think, was bad because they were kind of just stealing people's money. That can be bad, but that would be spared if you just, you know, make sure you're like, yeah, just ask the rep. Mind if I talk to your artist? I like that as a tip.
Yeah.
But I'd say also, like, you know, that can give you a good idea of, you know, don't get too into it, but just asking like, what's your experience, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there are also like a lot of artists, like say you admire certain artists or you have a collection of artists that you just keep going back to and you love their stuff. Look at who's repping them, you know, find out if you can contact them, or, hey, shoot them an email and say like, hey, what do you think? Who do you, you know, they'll probably tell you.
Yeah. Reverse engineering is the way to go for sure. Cause like, you know, and that can go for publishers too, where it's like, hey, what publishers should I approach? Well, what publishers do I like? You know, how did they get to that publisher? It's a good route.
Yeah.
Pikey Camp was asking, do you try to stay with one publisher or as many as possible?
I don't think that'll necessarily be an issue. I think.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, probably, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of get where they're coming from, though. Are you going to be sort of shunned for being unfaithful, so to speak, to a publisher, or is that what they're getting at?
I'm
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing.
Publishers, I've seen big name illustrators illustrating for the same publisher over and over again, but I've also seen them sort of do projects with other publishers as well. I think that most of the time, the only reason for that is really just because publishers tend to hire the same illustrators.
Yeah.
Over and over again, at least in children's books. So it's not necessarily because, you know, they sort of signed a contract with them and they're only supposed to publish with that one company. I think that you're welcome to and certainly allowed to publish with whomever you like. And your artist rep will probably have a handful that they're working with already that see them monthly, if not, you know, a couple times a year, and look at, you know, whoever they're repping and what their artists are doing and stuff like that. So
yeah, and
I think you're welcome to publish with as many and whoever you like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've met a couple artists who've gotten pretty big in publishing, and they'll sign like a multi-book deal with the publisher, and that's kind of akin to like if you were a rock band and you sign like to put out 3 albums through Virgin Records or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you're bound to deliver in that case, but if you don't have a contract obligating you to be loyal to a specific publisher, then frankly you shouldn't.
I think even in that case, you could do a project on the side that could be for a different publisher, and they wouldn't necessarily gripe as long as you're still fulfilling your contract with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your contract. So,
yeah.
But if they're gonna get you on the hook for like being totally loyal to one specific publisher, then, you know, they should be paying for that.
Well, they should be giving you work. I would assume if you got a publisher that just constantly giving you work, you don't need to look at another publisher. But I'm guessing unless you're superstar children's book illustrator, that's not going to be an issue.
That's usually not the norm, I don't think, unless you're like I said, like Mo Willems or, you know.
Yeah, and I think in those cases, like I said, the few people I've met who have like a multi-book deal, like they're getting paid substantially for it. So it's like, you know, and they're in a position to be contended against for it. So it's like, I don't think that's an issue. I think I would just say, if they're loyal to you, sure, be loyal to them. That's fine. You know, so if they give you plenty of work and they feed you, great. If they stop giving you plenty of work, go to who's going to give you work. I don't know, but yeah. So I think we've been going a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think this was a good topic. I feel like we barely kind of touched on your career. You have put out a lot of books. I would recommend for anybody on here who wants to kind of check out some of Mai's work, just go on Amazon and just look up Mai S. Kemble and just order a ton of her books. They're all really entertaining and beautifully illustrated, and that would be a good starting place if you're kind of curious about like what all she's done. And also your Society 6 page, what are you on Society 6?
It's just Mai Kemble.
Yeah. So
but I was going to say too, you can, I think on my website there's a link to email me. So if there are any further questions, please do so. Because I don't feel like I adequately answered enough questions. It's a really big topic. So
yeah, and we were kind of vague asking them too, but I think it's a good kind of introduction to the topic. It's a massive one, so I'm sure we'll have to have you back on. I mean, you're hard to get a hold of. But
I hope I will be soon.
Yeah.
Busy.
But I think it's been great having you on, and thank you for coming on our show. And I guess we should all sign out. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, Keenan said it was a great pleasure for you to be here on Artcasters, Mai.
Thank you, Keenan.
Yeah, pretty talented cartoonist. Okay, so, all right. You're on my channel. You know where to find me. If you haven't yet, go on topis.io and subscribe to Quarterly Stories. That actually helps me get more readers on there. And if you want to just see it where it's currently at, you can go to quarterlystories.com. And like I said, you're on my channel. If you've subscribed, hit the bell button so that every time we do this, it'll give you a little notification beforehand. Mai, where can we find your stuff, and where can people follow you on Instagram, and where can they get your beautiful prints, literary-based prints, and awesome kind of animal prints that'll be coming up soon? Where can people find all that?
Okay, my website is maiskemble.com, and from there there's links to my rep as well as my email. You can go to Society 6 and look for Mai Kemble. My Instagram is @MaiKemble. Like I said, a lot of this is still sort of in the works, so I'm still starting research, branding my stuff, so a lot of that stuff will change, so keep checking back. And then also I wanted to say, after Scott says his little bit, what are you working on? And I want to see it.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll screen share it. Yeah, I'm just working on my.
I have a little sketch to show too that I was working on while we were.
Yeah, usually I'll screen share, but no one else was, so I did.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, this is my comic book. I'm just adding the tones. It's black and white, but it's got tones, so it's kids versus zombies. It's kind of like,
I love his little slippers.
Yeah, this character is
cool.
loosely based off of my brother, and this one's loosely based off of me when we were kids. But my brother was big into, well, me too, but like he was a little younger, so Sesame Street and the Muppets, and he had a Sesame Street room, and my mom and dad actually made the lamp with the Sesame Street lamp, and he had all the puppets and stuff. So he's just through the whole series. It kind of starts at night. They wake up in the morning, and this basically zombie apocalypse has happened. So throughout the whole book, he's just in his PJs, kind of walking around with slippers, and is carrying around his little stuffed animal guy. So
that's rad.
Yeah,
very cool.
Very awesome.
All right, you can say your bit. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, so the way you can find me at circworks.com, SERKWORKS, Circworks on YouTube. And if anyone is new, the way we do this is we usually do Artcasters every week. We rotate from Josh's channel and my channel and then back to Josh's channel. And sometimes it can be on a different day. So because that gets kind of confusing, what we do is we set up a newsletter. And basically, if you just sign up for the newsletter, there's a link in the description. Usually about 20-30 minutes before we go live, I'll send that newsletter out so you know where we're going to be and everything. So yeah, sign up for the newsletter.
Nice. All right.
Thanks again, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All
How do I
right.
sign out of this?
I'll sign out. You're good.
Okay.
Hey, bye, guys.
Bye.